During the first flight of the day, the sound of my plane changed, and this turned out to be why. This plane has 70 to 80 flights on it since I installed this muffler. The good news is that I caught it pretty early, and that AeroWorks fuel-proofs the wood on the front end of their airplanes, so this contamination isn't bad at all. Before I can do anything else, we need to clean up the exhaust flanges. This is a brass brush, and it doesn't tear up the metal. And I can feel with my finger that there's no lumps of anything still on the flanges. This is the bolt that the muffler was hanging on, and you can see how the hole is elongated, but that's just at the very surface. The rest of the hole is fine. I did check this surface with a straight edge to make sure that the surface is flat. I also want to make sure that these flanges don't have any oil or grease left on them, so I'm going to clean them down with a paper towel soaked with alcohol, and I'll repeat this until the paper comes away clean. I apply a light coat of the Permatex gasket maker to both of the flanges. After I get the flange coated out, I'll go back with a piece of a tie wrap and clean out the port itself and the holes. We don't want to leave gasket material in either one of those. We don't have to get real meticulous with this. We just don't want any big chunks of that gasket maker that can get sucked into the cylinder or might compromise the threads when we put the bolts in with thread lock later. I found the easiest way to get thread locker in the holes like this is just to squirt a little bit in there. Then when you run the bolts in, it'll distribute itself over the threads. Then you can carefully put the muffler on and get both of the bolts started. I start both of the bolts and then go back and forth and slowly walk them down. You want to prevent the flanges from rubbing against each other and rubbing that material off. The instructions on the Permatex tube say to draw the pieces together just until the material starts to ooze out of the gap. I know people who have rushed this and just torqued the bolts down right now, but they've had problems with this gasket material failing then. The instructions say to leave this sit for an hour before we torque the bolts down, and they know what they're talking about, so that's what we're going to do. Okay, it's a little more than an hour later, and I'm going to go ahead and tighten the bolts down. I like to go back and forth so I can make sure that I'm tightening them down equally. We don't want to pull this flange one way or the other. Once we get the bolts good and tight, the instructions say to leave it sit for 24 hours before we start the motor. And that's all there is to it. I do plan on checking the muffler bolts anytime I pull the cowl, but if I do have to go through this procedure every 80 flights or so, that's okay too. That's way better than the 4 or 5 flights I was getting with the gaskets.